So, dear colleagues, dear friends, we propose you to start. Today we are holding a public lecture with Ambassador Gustavo Zlauvinen, President-designate of the 10th Review Conference for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is great pleasure and honor for us to have such a distinguished lecturer today. Please pay attention that we will record the lecture to publish it within our education platform, Non-Proliferation World. The lecture is being held within the dual degree MA program in non-proliferation studies. It has been developed by Peer Center MGIMO in Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey since 2015. And we're happy that modern technologies let us invite to take part in our lectures, not only our students, but also our colleagues, friends, and all who are interested in the issues of non-proliferation and disarmament. We will have Q&A session as well. Thus, I would like to ask all our online participants, not panelists, to write their questions in the chat. We do hope that we will have time to ask all of them. Today, we have about 50 participants online and about 20 panelists. Before we will turn to our honorable keynote speaker, I would like to give the floor to our dear colleague and friend of Peer Center, Ambassador of Russia to Argentina, Dmitry Feoktistov, for opening remarks.
Thank you indeed. Good afternoon again. So many familiar faces. Gustavo and Vladimir, hi again. Dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to share with you brief introductory remarks before Ambassador Gustavo Zlauvinen's lecture on the prospects of the upcoming 2020 Review Conference for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The issue of sustaining and preserving nuclear non-proliferation regime remains the cornerstone of the international security architecture. And I'm glad that this topic attracts the attention of the distinguished experts and students. I'm particularly glad that this lecture is taking place at MGIMO, which is my alma mater, in the framework of the dual degree program on global security, nuclear policy, and WMD non-proliferation, organized by Peer Center. Peer is one of the leading Russian and global think tanks dealing with international security and non-proliferation, and as such, it deserves special credit for taking the lead in non-proliferation education and training. Its new initiative, nonproliferation.world e-learning platform, contributes to spreading the knowledge on nuclear arms, nuclear non-proliferation threats, and nuclear energy opportunities across the globe to such target audiences as university students, postgraduates, experts community, and the media, in accordance with the guidelines established by the UN General Assembly Resolution 57/60. Today's lecture will be delivered by a top-notch diplomat and a good friend of mine, Mr. Gustavo Zlauvinen, as you already know, who is the President-designate of the forthcoming NPT Review Conference. Mr. Zlauvinen has indeed been assigned a difficult task. The NPT is living harsh times, and the prospects for the adoption of a consensus final document look bleak. In the nuclear disarmament cluster, we observe two opposing trends. On the one hand, there is an increasing demand for nuclear disarmament here and now, without taking into account the security concerns of nuclear weapon states. On the other hand, the international security environment has significantly deteriorated. While we have witnessed positive shifts like the extension of the New START or the resumption of Russian-US strategic stability dialogue, we have to overcome many challenges and sort out the debris of the past. The problems are no less acute in non-proliferation. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is in intensive care unit, and the pathway towards its restoration is becoming increasingly thorny. While there has been some progress towards the establishment of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, the issue is still promising to be at the forefront of the NPT discussions. The third pillar of NPT is the peaceful use of nuclear energy. As you know, the world is undergoing a global energy transition towards cleaner and more sustainable energy. In our view, peaceful applications of the atomic power should be part of these transitions, and I hope that the NPT Review Conference will ensure appropriate political climate for that. Russia is actively working to preserve the integrity of the NPT and strengthen the international nuclear non-proliferation regime through dialogue and consensus-based decisions. We have a constructive, solution-oriented agenda and expect the same from our partners. And finally, a couple of words on the keynote speaker. We first met with Mr. Zlauvinen in New York almost 20 years ago. Yes, Gustavo, we are old. When I was the head of the disarmament and non-proliferation desk at the permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the UN, and Gustavo served, if I remember right, as a permanent representative of the Director General of the International Atomic Energy to the UN. During his career in the diplomatic service, Ambassador Zlauvinen has served as a delegate of Argentina to a number of disarmament, nuclear energy, and arms control conferences and meetings, including the IAEA Board of Governors and the General Conference, the UN General Assembly's First Committee, the NPT review process, the Conference on the Adoption of the Nuclear Safety Convention, and the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of the Outer Space. When I arrived to Buenos Aires 3 years ago in the capacity of the Russian ambassador, Gustavo was the first deputy foreign minister. And using this opportunity, I would like to thank him for his personal input in the promotion of the comprehensive strategic partnership between our countries. Today, Ambassador Zlauvinen, without any exaggeration, is one of the 3 permanent Argentinian diplomats coordinating the work of international mechanisms in the area of disarmament and non-proliferation. The other 2 are Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the IAEA, and Gustavo Anchil, Chair of the Hague Code of Conduct. I have no doubt that all of you will enjoy Mr. Zlauvinen's public lecture today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Orlov to give some welcoming remarks as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you, Ambassador Feoktistov, for your kind words. Más vale tarde que nunca, como se dice. Hemos recibido información oficial de usted, señor embajador, que la conferencia de revisión del Tratado de No Proliferación Nuclear se celebrará en Nueva York en enero del próximo año. We received official information from you, Mr. Ambassador, just recently that the NPT Review Conference, in fact, will take place in New York in the coming January. It is important that we will have an opportunity for a comprehensive review very soon in these difficult circumstances because of the coronavirus pandemic. I applaud this move that we finally will have that practical platform for discussion. It is no less important that civil society is involved in the process in New York. When I say civil society, I mean various groups from think tanks to activists, but I also mean young people, new generation on non-proliferators who need to have the boost through the process, through the conversations. I know the difficulties associated with the participation of the civil society for the coming conference, but I truly hope that at least there will be an attempt by all of us to overcome them to the extent possible. My first conference actually was my first experience in nuclear non-proliferation. It was in 1995. When, as a young man, I witnessed indefinite extension of the NPT, most importantly surrounded by the most experienced individuals in the field, who were or later on became my friends, like Ambassador Roland Timirbayev, George Ban, Jayanta Dhanapala, Bill Potter, Rebecca Johnston, just to name a few. Since then, my institute never missed a conference with peer delegation on the one hand, and myself being part of the official Russian delegation on the other. By itself, a good example of synergy between government thinking and non-governmental organization activities. We witnessed together ups and downs, but never made dramas of the downs, and always tried to contribute to policy recommendations to make the best from the situation when we saw the ups and support those ups. So never been pessimistic on the process, always been realistic. This is what I was taught from Roland Timmerby, from my teacher. And Jayanta Dhanapala always told me another lesson here, that very important lesson for all the NPT process, for all the NPT review process, is that a foundation for strong and positive decisions should be built by consensus and on consensus principle, without alienating parties of the treaty, even if they are a minority. You will face a challenging times, Your Excellency. Please share with us your vision on how to achieve success at the January conference, but no less important, how you define success for the review process and for the forthcoming review process and the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orlov. So now I have pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Zlauvinen.
Thank you very much. First of all, Dr. Orlov, Ambassador Fektistov, dear Dmitry, thank you very much for your kind words. Distinguished experts, students, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking Professor Orlov and the Peer Center for inviting me to speak to you today. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to speak to students and young people, as Dr. Orlov just mentioned. It is especially so in this case because you are studying the issues that I and my colleagues are immersed in, those related to nuclear proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and at the end of the day, nuclear weapons. I also very much appreciate that the Peer Center and its academic counterparts in GIMO and the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies turn out ready-made experts in this field. Many graduates from these programs are already working on these issues in governments, think tanks, and the United Nations, and I happen to know many of them. And with good reasons that we have celebrated that, because preventing the spread and use of nuclear weapons while working towards their total elimination are of fundamental importance to the future of our planet, its security, and its sustainable development. When he first witnessed the unleashed power of the atom, Robert Oppenheimer, head of the Manhattan Project, is quoted as saying, and I quote, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds," close of quotations. His assessment of the destructive power of nuclear weapons remains accurate 76 years after the, thankfully, only occasions when they were used in warfare, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nuclear weapons are still the only weapon with the potentially existential consequences. That is, the potential to extinguish all life on Earth. It is increasingly clear that any use of nuclear weapons, especially in a populated area, would precipitate a humanitarian disaster. The current international environment is a particularly fluid and evolving one. Relationships between countries that possess nuclear weapons continue to sour, while at the same time, those countries are qualitatively improving their nuclear arsenals and in some cases, quantitatively expanding them. Nuclear doctrines have become increasingly opaque, yet more expansive. Rhetoric on the utility of nuclear weapons echoes outdated views on fighting and winning a nuclear war. New strategic capabilities and new domains have exposed potentially catastrophic vulnerabilities in nuclear weapons command and control structures, while possibly lowering the threshold for conflict and creating worrying prospects about escalation to the use of nuclear weapons. At the same time, regional conflicts are fueling proliferation drivers, and technological advances are removing barriers to the possible development or acquisition of nuclear weapons. There is an emerging consensus that, as the United Nations Secretary General has said, nuclear risks have reached heights not seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. The chances of misperception or miscalculation are alarmingly high. Amidst this brew of potential dangers, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, remains a lighthouse, striving to prevent the international community from crashing into the rocks of nuclear calamity. 51 years after its entry into force, and just over a quarter of a century since its indefinite extension, it is a bulwark against the growing nuclear risks of our time. It is the primary mechanism to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, the key instrument for preventing their use and bringing about their elimination, and a vehicle for spreading the benefits of the peaceful uses of nuclear technology. Its near universal membership means that its commitments and obligations are binding on the vast majority of the international community. In short, the NPT is an essential element of international peace and security. Almost 2 years as president-designate, I started to feel like I was going to be a permanent president-designate of the Review Conference. But fortunately, a week ago, the state parties took the formal decision to hold the Review Conference from the 4th to the 28th of January next year. Obviously, when we're going to meet in January, they will not be under the ideal or perfect situation or circumstances, because still will be some restrictions due to the COVID pandemic. But I believe that we'll do our best, the state parties, the UN Secretariat, and myself and the Bureau, so that we can have a conference as productive and engaging as possible, and that we're going to be able to deal with all the substantive matters that are complex and important, and that we're going to do so in person and fulfilling our responsibilities. Now, obviously, this is something to celebrate, but as I say, this is not a victory that will have a lot of time to enjoy or to savor, because now I would say is when the real work, the hard work, is going to begin. I cannot overstate the importance of the NPT during these uncertain times, and therefore the Review Conference is going to be facing those challenges. We know that past Review Conferences have played an integral role as stabilizing forces in international security, charting forward-looking courses for the elimination of nuclear weapons, and beyond peace and security, Review Conferences can make a real impact on other issues, including on sustainability, through the facilitation of the peaceful uses of nuclear science and technologies, and other matters. Now, the conference is a real opportunity to strengthen the implementation of the treaty. It takes place at the end of the day every 5 years, and to ensure that the treaty is fit for purpose to address emerging challenges and the future threats. It is an opportunity the international community cannot afford to squander. Now, in my time as president-designate, I have heard nothing but the strenuous pledging of support for the NPT and to the obtainment of a successful, or what I call it, a meaningful outcome to the review conference. Unfortunately, despite this genuine commitment, success at the review conference is far from preordained. Many challenges await us at the review conference in January. Some of these challenges are, for state parties, somewhat, as usual as in the past, plus à change, as the French will say. That is to say, those issues have dodged the NPT for years. However, some challenges are new and reflect the shifting dynamics related to nuclear weapons in the 21st century. While all state parties remain committed to the goals of the treaty, divisions persist over how to achieve them. There are divisions within the nuclear weapon states, divisions between the nuclear weapon states and the non-nuclear weapon states, and divisions amongst non-nuclear weapon states as well. These pertain to the pace and scale of nuclear disarmament, to the implementation of commitments given at previous review conferences, to the strengthening of the safeguard system, and to how to grapple with regional proliferation challenges. The dynamics of the geostrategic context that I mentioned earlier loom large over the conference. They are challenges not only to international peace and security, but to the non-proliferation and disarmament regime as we know it, the regime of which the NPT has been the beating heart. Over the course of 51 years, the NPT has proven remarkably resilient. It has been able to evolve to address new concerns and take advantage of bourgeoisie opportunities. The 1995 review and extension conferences effectively ushered in a new area for the treaty, in which the review cycle became the de facto multilateral negotiation forum on all aspects of nuclear weapons, especially nuclear disarmament. The onus is now on state parties to use the review conference to ensure the treaty remains able to adapt to the current environment, and to ensure the NPT is placed as not only the fulcrum of non-proliferation disarmament, but as a pillar of peace and security. When it comes to securing success at the review conference, state parties need to embrace the same spirit of flexibility and compromise that they have shown throughout the lengthy hiatus due to the pandemic. They need to be ready and willing to listen. They should prepare to engage in real, direct dialogue and negotiations, not just the rote recitation of national positions. Anyone who has listened to me since I was appointed president-designate will know that I have been like a broken record regarding what an outcome could look like. Let me state my position once more. It is not my job, it is not my responsibility to decide what an outcome should look like or decide structure and content. That is entirely the responsibility and the prerogative of state parties. But having said that, it is my responsibility to facilitate a successful, meaningful outcome. Having engaged in consultations with state parties for almost 2 years now, have some idea of what their priorities and preferences are, have an inkling of where some green shoots of convergence are springing up. And believe me, I'm in no doubt about what the divergences of positions are. I'm fully aware of that. Now, maximizing convergence while narrowing divergence will take a combination of preparedness, hard work, and political will. Based on what I have heard from state parties, I believe that the following could be elements of success at the review conference. It is not an exhaustive list, and is given as a caveat, with the caveat that it is a suggestion, not a map or a recipe. First of all, balance is the key. As the Chinese philosopher Confucius mentioned,
Balance is the perfect state of still water. Let that be our model. The NPT is a grand bargain, one that rests on the balanced interplay between its three pillars: nuclear disarmament, nuclear non-proliferation, and the peaceful uses of nuclear technologies. Successful implementation of the trade-off in commitments and obligations state parties have assumed under the treaty requires a balanced approach. I hope this will be foremost in state parties' minds. As an overarching principle, state parties could reaffirm their commitment to the NPT, to all of its goals, and to implementation of all its obligations. They could reaffirm the commitment to strengthening the norms against the use, proliferation, and testing of nuclear weapons, and to the pursuit of a world free of nuclear weapons. And they could take steps to strengthen the implementation of commitments previously undertaken across all three pillars, including through the possible development of some kind of accountability mechanism. To delve more deeply into each of the pillars, it is clear from my consultations with state parties that progress in Pillar 1, meaning nuclear disarmament, and the implementation of Article 6 is essential for a majority of state parties. The reaffirmation by Presidents Putin and Biden of the Gorbachev-Reagan principle that nuclear war cannot be won and must not be fought was welcome, as was their commitment to dialogue on strategic stability. All state parties, and particularly the nuclear weapon states, could consider making a similar joint reaffirmation and committing to such dialogue. State parties have also stressed the need for urgent practical measures to reduce the risk of a nuclear weapon being used. Such risk reduction measures could include changes to posture to reduce the possibility of accidents or miscalculations, increased transparency, and the introduction or reintroduction of confidence-building measures. Many states have pointed to the particularly acute need for such measures in addressing the nexus between emerging technologies and domains of conflicts and nuclear weapons. Concerns have especially been raised about the potential to hack, spoof, or otherwise interfere with command and control structures, and about the impact of new strategic capabilities such as hypersonic weapons on decision-making processes. However, it has also been made clear that such risk reduction measures must also advance the complete, verifiable, and irreversible elimination of nuclear weapons. Reconciling divergent positions on how to achieve this will be crucial to achieving a successful outcome. To this end, strong support has been registered for an outcome that includes reinvigorated efforts to seek the entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, for commitments to further reduction in nuclear arsenals in the near future, to advancing initiative to achieve and maintain a world free of nuclear weapons, such as disarmament verification, and a reaffirmation of the commitment to achieve the complete elimination of nuclear arsenals. Under Pillar 2 of the treaty, which is non-proliferation, state parties will need to grapple with emerging challenges to the safeguard system posed by emerging technology. They will need to reinvigorate efforts to universalize the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and the updated small quantities protocols. At the review conference, state parties could consider how to ensure the safest and most secure use of nuclear power. The latter is of particular importance given the degree to which technological advances are bypassing existing security measures. Preventing non-state actors from acquiring nuclear material, let alone nuclear weapons, should be a priority for all states. Perhaps most importantly, states will need to examine how the treaty can assist in mitigating regional proliferation concerns, particularly on the Korean Peninsula and in the Middle East. How to approach the 1995 resolution on achieving a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and of all other weapons of mass destruction is one question that needs to be answered. This is especially true given the parallel process on this issue mandated by the UN General Assembly. And finally, under Pillar 3 of the treaty, there is an opportunity to shine a spotlight on an element of the NPT's grand bargain that has been undervalued for too long. The peaceful applications of nuclear science and technology are playing a growing role in other global priorities, from sustainable development to climate change to dealing with global health emergencies such as COVID. The NPT's position as a platform to facilitate the benefits of these technologies adds an added dimension to the treaty, further centralizing its importance in international relations. The review conference is an opportunity to further raise awareness about the spectrum of benefits provided by the peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology to the widest possible audience, and to enable state parties to better understand how these applications can meet their individual needs. The conference could also be a place in which to engage industry and practitioners on how they can assist in the implementation of Article 4 of the treaty. The review conference could seek to ensure the long-term security and viability of the technical cooperation program of the IAEA and encourage all states in a position to do so to make additional contributions. These could include both financial and in-kind contributions, such as targeted capacity building. The conference could also pledge to identify gaps in the provision of technical assistance and develop a practical strategy amongst the parties for how to fill those gaps. Now, beyond the substance of the treaty, there's one area that I have been advocating for throughout my time as president-designate, and that is for an inclusive approach to the review conference. My conversations with state parties indicate that they feel the same way. A more inclusive conference provides an opportunity to listen to the views of all invested actors and stakeholders who can provide useful insights and ideas. A plurality of views can help produce lasting results. In the context of the review conference, inclusivity means creating a space for young people, such as yourself, to hear their views aired. It means ensuring the valuable expertise and insight of civil society, and that can be utilized. And it means holding our conversations in a manner that reflects equal participation for and the perspective of all genders. The road we have ahead to get to this position has been a rocky one, but I believe we are finally on the cusp of reaching our destination. However, as I said, now the hard work begins to make a success of the 10th NPT Review Conference. I look forward to hearing your questions, and I thank you again.
Muchas gracias, señor embajador. Thank you very much for sharing with us your views, and definitely you should know that you have strong support in ourselves for all your efforts of integrated positive development at the conference, which we definitely all very much would like to see. But without further ado, I would give floor to the students, And definitely we have here a number of questions arriving through chat, through the Q&A, but primarily we will give the floor to our dual degree students, and time permitting, we'll be collecting also questions from the whole audience, so panelists first and all attendees next. And I see now the first in my list, our student from Russia, Galina Salnikova. Galina, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Your Excellency, for such an elaborated brief about the conference. I think this is very necessary for us all to see the general framework of what we shall look into at the conference. And my question has been answered in part by your brief, but I hope to have some more details if you may give them to us. So basically, we all know that review process is very much complicated. We have like around 200 states, we have different coalitions, we have different relations among them. And I wanted to ask you, as the person who is going to kind of orchestrate the process and try to facilitate it, what should be the approach of the states, like the mechanism, how they cooperate? Are there some coalitions which are really in like a great disagreement right now, who need to negotiate first, or are there coalitions which can unite and pursue one idea altogether? So basically, how do you see this process to happen to reach the final document consensusly? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is going to be a complex process because the issues at hand are complex, not only in nature, but also in the dynamics. I believe that all state parties want a successful review conference. Obviously, we are fully aware of the divergent positions on many of those issues. And as I say, that if state parties come to the table with a political will to listen and to negotiate in good faith, I'm hopeful that we can get, as I said, a meaningful outcome to the review conference. Now, how we will manage that process is something that obviously we are going to be basing ourselves on previous experiences at past review conferences. But of course, the dynamics and the context in which we're going to be having those negotiations is going to be different. I believe that there are already a number of groupings or coalitions of state parties that are working on potential language on some of the issues, like the Stockholm Initiative, with this, the stepping stone approach, in particular to nuclear disarmament, the NPT initiative, and many others. I believe that those initiatives are welcome, and other state parties are also working on their own contributions. For example, Japan just tabled in the first committee of the UN General Assembly resolutions on how to strengthen the whole mechanism. Just Japan believe that language from that resolution could be useful to the review conference. So I think we are going to have plenty of inputs from state parties or group of state parties on language regarding the different elements or issues at the review conference. But at the end of the day, we'll have to wait for the review conference to start. I would say that the second and the third week, when we're going to be having the main committees to deal with the three pillars and how they start those negotiations evolve into actual language and text, and then the end game is going to be during the last week, when Dr. Olof knows very well, when everything is cooked up during the last week or not. Success or failure will be just born, unfortunately, the last few days of the review conference. But I think just my approach, at least as President designate, is that we should have open, frank discussions, exchange of views, even if those views are divergent from others, because this is what the treaty requires. The treaty requires from the state parties to meet every 5 years and to review the implementation of the treaty in all its obligations, and then just to charter future action for the next review cycle. It does not require the adoption of a document or a number of documents. It does not. So in my reading of the treaty, process is as important a result, in the sense that the fact that 190 state parties will meet in January in New York to discuss the overall implementation of the treaty, in my view in itself, that is what the treaty requires, and there will be a success. Obviously, will be much better to have a final outcome adopted by consensus, and that it can be just follow up and implemented by state parties. So I think just that's the approach, to be transparent, to be just open in our positions, but also, as I said before, bring in a political will to compromise, because at the end of the day, it's the 50th anniversary of the treaty. Well, it's already 51, but technically it's 50s. And I think that in my consultations, all state parties have just expressed and stressed the importance and the relevance of the treaty, even under the current challenging circumstances. So I think just the reiteration of the vitality and the relevance of the treaty and all its obligations is something that all state parties want to have. Then obviously we have to deal with the complexity of nuclear disarmament on the Middle East, on the additional protocol, DPRK. There are many challenging issues over there, but I believe that with the right political will and the will to compromise for the overall good and to maintain the treaty as the overarching cornerstone of nuclear non-proliferation disarmament, I think it's going to be key to have, and always I will repeat, a successful, but in my view, a meaningful review conference. Meaningful means that whatever the outcome is, written or unwritten, is that it's an outcome that can be followed up, can be implemented by the state parties. To me, it's as important the day after the review conference as the day during the review conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I have Chip Myers, so Mark Myers, and then I have Sergey Semyonov and Daria Heria next in my list. Chip, please.
Yes, thank you. So it seems like you are pretty optimistic about the future of the NPT and the non-proliferation regime. But I was wondering, like, how we can continue to be optimistic about the NPT given all the challenges that we face in our modern, ever-changing world, and the risks of countries like the DPRK and Iran with the JCPOA not being currently in force. So I was wondering what you think about this.
Thank you, Chip. First of all, by nature, I'm optimistic. That's why I play tennis and I play poker. If not, I wouldn't be able to do either. But you're right. You're right. Look, I'm not saying that the NPT is perfect. I'm not saying that the NPT is in good shape. On the contrary, like any human being production, is imperfect. Is obviously it's far from perfect, but it is what we have it. Always I remind us, state parties when they start, criticizing some just lack of implementation of the treaty or the unfairness of some of its obligations seen by the, by state parties. It's not my own criticism. Always I remind them that had the review conference in 1995 not decided to extend the treaty indefinitely, and you have to remember that during those negotiations, some delegations, including Mexico and others from the NAM, they were pushing to extend the treaty for another 25 years. Remember, back in 1969 was negotiated. It was done only for 25 years because it was a reason, yes. So in 1995, many delegations thought that, okay, let's extend it for another 25 years, and then we'll decide whether it was working or not, yes. but the prevailing majority, in particular, by the nuclear weapon states, was let's extend it indefinitely. But had we not have done that, the treaty would have expired last year. So imagine last year or this year if we would have to renegotiate extending the treaty. I believe it will be impossible. I don't think we'll have the political will to extend. So in thinking that, I think we realize that it's better to keep the treaty with all its imperfections. I know that DPRK withdrawal or near withdrawal depends. It's a legal discussion about that, having a blow to that, but it has been the only case. Have only been the only case, and it's been dealt by the Security Council now, and hopefully one day the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula could be achieved, and DPRK can come back to the treaty. Obviously, just challenges in the Middle East, the Iran's nuclear program, which is being dealt by the IAEA, are also challenges. But I think that the NPT has matured, and that we can deal with those challenges and make an assessment of that. So in short, it's far from perfect, but it's the best we can have today, and probably we wouldn't have it if we have to negotiate it again today.
Thank you very much, and very much sharing your viewpoint on that, Mr. Ambassador. And now we have Daria Heria. And I know Daria's question. It will be about Middle East, always an easy one. But Dasha, could you just elaborate yourself, probably, just that question? And then I have Sergei Semyonov after that in my list, and I have Edward now. Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Ambassador, for your insightful introduction to the topic. Yeah, my question is about the Middle East, quite problematic issue for non-proliferation. So lately we were informed that the second session of the conference on the establishment of the WMD free zone in the Middle East will be held in December. So what are your expectations? Could the negative or positive outcome of this conference influence the agenda of the upcoming review conference? Could it jeopardize the negotiations, or maybe it will become a sideline issue?
Thank you, Daria. Yes, the Middle East has been, it is, and probably will continue to be for a long time, one stumbling block at any review conference. In the past, has proven to block consensus on the final outcome documents. That shows, how relevant and important that issue is in the views of many delegations, not only from delegations from the Middle East, but from around the world. And I believe that this is not going to be an exception at the 10th review conference. Now, what is different, from this review conference from the previous one is exactly what you mentioned. Just the UN convened conference for the establishment of a WMD free zone in the Middle East, which started, in November 2019. I will continue the end of this month and beginning of December. And that in the view of many, and in particular, many in the Middle East, they believe that parallel process is finally helping to start implementation of the 1995 resolutions by the NPT on the Middle East. So in the views of those countries, those delegations, they believe that this is a positive new element that should be reflected at the review conference, and that the review conference should reflect that finally there is something, it's a parallel process, but it's going into the direction of the implementation of the 1995 resolutions. So, and with that, those delegations believe that if the review conference take note of that and express satisfaction of that parallel process, then they will have no objections to that mentioning in the review conference. So, in the views of those delegations, this time around in the review conference, the handle of the Middle East issue should not be as traumatic or problematic as in the past. Now, the problem to this approach is that, one particular, country, which is the US, for the time being, just does not, or is objecting to even a reference to that parallel process, because they claim that Israel, which is in the Middle East, has not engaged, has not participated in that parallel process, and therefore should be no reference to that UN conference. I believe that there are already talks, so that probably, hopefully, the US could moderate that position, and if that were to take place, that will just help dealing with that issue at the review conference. Now, but on the other hand, you have a couple of, or more than a couple of countries, state parties from the same region, in particular Iran and Syria, that while recognizing the existence of that parallel track, they don't see that new track is helping at all in implementation of the 1995 resolution, and therefore they want a very harsh language at the review conference. So I think just dealing with those two positions, hopefully, if those were to go on a bit more moderate and go along with the position expressed by the a great majority of delegations of what I said, it could be a reason for hope. But as I said, it's a complex issue. It could be a stumbling block at the review conference. I hope that this time around is not, and that with the right language and political will, we can get a compromise at the review conference. This is my hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I have Sergey Semenov from Peer Center and graduate of this dual degree program, and Edward, our student, will be preparing next.
Estimado señor embajador, muchas gracias por su intervención. I have two questions regarding nuclear disarmament. First, you mentioned that among possible nuclear risk reduction measures, there are measures concerning nuclear doctrines, nuclear postures. The P5, the nuclear weapon states, have been planning to present the results of their dialogue on nuclear doctrines on the sidelines of the NPT Review Conference. So what, in your view, are the criteria for this presentation to be successful and to make a positive contribution to the outcome of the review conference? My second question regards the disarmament pillar of the NPT. You've mentioned measures that mostly have to be undertaken by the nuclear weapon states. But how about the concerns of the environment for nuclear disarmament, the security arrangements which will prompt nuclear weapon states to disarm, to make further steps towards the objectives of the Article 6 of the NPT? What measures can be taken at this review conference? Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Spasiba, Sergey, spasiba. Look, just a nuclear disarmament, as I mentioned in my statement today, and I keep repeating throughout my presentations everywhere, is going to be probably one of the major stumbling blocks at the review conference. Why? Because it's a growing sense of frustrations by a large, or what I say, majority of state parties to the NPT, be it from the NAM as well as from some WEOC and other regions. So it's across the board, that sense of frustrations regarding the lack of or the low pace of implementation of the nuclear disarmament obligations by the P5, in particular during the last two review cycles. So that obviously is putting a tremendous strain on the relationships among state parties. And I believe that the P5 will have to come to the review conference with some concrete, with some concrete steps just to, on how to keep moving or start moving again on the nuclear disarmament front. And what you mentioned about changing, just on the nuclear doctrines and nuclear postures, things that I mentioned before, just reducing, nuclear risks and transparency is going to be welcome. And I believe that the P5 process is working on that. But, I believe that have to be in just placing a frame. It's in a political frame that obviously the P5 are still committed to the obligations on the treaty under Article 6 to, eventually work on the total elimination of nuclear weapons. I know that is not easy. I'm not naive. It's an extremely complex process with many strings attached. But I believe that, as I say, for that, vast majority of state parties, they need that reconfirmation. And I'm not talking about past commitment here, which is another side problem to that. But I think just is much more philosophical, if you want to. So I think have to be a combination of, some practical concrete steps that the P5 can endorse, saying, okay, we will do our best, we'll keep pushing to work on, as you say, that changing our nuclear doctrines, on transparency, on nuclear risk reductions, but the overall framework, the overall political framework have to be stated by the P5. Look, on the P5 process, they're going to have a meeting in Paris, beginning of December. I hope to be invited, as I was invited 2 years ago when they have that, the last in-person P5 coordination process in London. So I hope to be there for the opening remarks, and I'm going to be, passing the same message. The P5 have to just to bring to the table much more than what I heard so far. Now, obviously, the P5 and others, just linked, progress or lack of progress on nuclear disarmament to the current environment, and therefore say that only when the environment, the geostrategic environment among nuclear weapon states and between nuclear weapon states and nuclear weapon states, it will be such that they can make progress on nuclear disarmament. Well, that view is challenged by a great majority of state parties. If you talk to NAM and you talk to some WEOCs and others, they will say that no, they don't see that nuclear disarmament as expressed in Article 6 should be conditioned to any circumstances. And on the contrary, and many view that nuclear, making progress in nuclear disarmament could help diffuse the current environment. So it's the other way around in the views of many. And if you look into the history of the NPT and the history of armed controls treaties and processes, they took place under even more difficult geostrategic environment during the Cold War or another extremely extraordinary circumstances, and still concrete important agreements on arms control took place. So I think just both parties have their own way. I'm not going to take part to that, but I'm saying that for many countries it's the other way around. Now, what measures the NPT can take to assuage or to help that environment? I think having a meaningful outcome, having an outcome that is by consensus, that restate the relevance of the treaty, that restate just the importance of full implementation of all obligations, but encouraging state parties to engage each other to better implement their obligations. I think in itself, hopefully will help. I don't know to what extent, maybe just to address the current environment we are living in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I give floor to, I have Edward here, and the next will be Alexandra Zubenka.
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for talking to us today. As we all know, this last January, the TPNW came into force. I was wondering if you think there'll be significant impacts on the upcoming NPT review con from this, whether or not, secondly, the TPNW is fundamentally incompatible with NPT, and lastly, what the prospects might be for something like a factual statement about the entry into force of that within the final documents from the RevCon. So, thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah, the TPNW is a new element for the discussions at the review conference. It's something that it didn't exist 5 years ago, and obviously is gaining momentum. I think like 60 plus countries, state parties to the NPT that also have signed and ratified the TPNW, and therefore, just those state parties to both treaties, they would like to have a reflection of the entry into force of the TPNW at any outcome of the NPT Review Conference. But also, they would like to have a positive language saying that the TPNW is complementary to the NPT, that should work together, it's not a competition. Now, the problem is that, for state parties to the NPT that have not signed nor ratified the TPNW, they see that, that is becoming a new issue of contention, because in particular the nuclear weapon states, while they agree with the overall purpose and goal of the TPNW, which is the total elimination of nuclear weapons, they don't see the new treaty as the right instrument to fulfill that goal. They believe that it's well-intentioned, or at least they don't go into the intentions, but they don't think it's an efficient tool to reach that goal. Now, obviously, at the review conference, we're going to have those divergent positions. How are we going to match that? Some of the, obviously, the nuclear weapon states don't want any reference to the TPNW, but I think just both sides, talking to many state parties to the TPNW, they don't want their new treaty to be the main stumbling block of the treaty. We have many others already important. We mentioned nuclear disarmament, Middle East, and others. So they don't want to become the main reasons for any failure for the review conference. So I'm counting on their flexibility, and also I'm counting on the P5 to realize that they have to acknowledge, they have to understand that the reality have changed. I cannot impose on them just to go and pray, amazing things, on the TPNW, but at least to recognize the existence and period. So again, it will be a matter of political will to compromise and the language. At the end of the day, with diplomats, we live or die based on the language that we can manage to agree or not. But I'm hoping that we can handle it. I'm hoping that TPNW is not going to be the main bone of contention at the review conference. Maybe others, but I'm hoping that this is not going to be.
Thank you. And now I have Alexandra Zubenko, who is a student at MGIMO and junior research fellow at the Peer Center, and Hannah is preparing.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. My question is probably too specific, but you've raised the problem of change of nuclear postures. And I wanted to ask the following question. So I saw that Stockholm Initiative Group insisted that all nuclear weapon states includes no first use and sole purpose provisions in their nuclear doctrines. I know that the discussion is quite old, but still some non-nuclear weapon states argue that the very mention of the word use in posture increases the possibility of unleashing nuclear war. So what is your opinion on that? And do you believe that this question does have any importance? And what other changes, in your opinion, should nuclear weapon states make in their doctrines to make NPT more effective? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Yes, a very specific and technical issue. I believe that nuclear, change of nuclear posture and nuclear reviews is seen by many state parties, non-nuclear weapon state parties, as an element that have to be discussed, have to be just how to say, just acknowledged by the nuclear weapons states as part of re-engaging on the nuclear disarmament front. Obviously, the no first use clause is a challenging one. You have, just some of the nuclear weapon states that they do have that, like I think China, no first strike policy. Others, I think the US have changed it during the Trump administrations. So obviously, it's linked to the not only to the nuclear posture, the individual nuclear posture, but also is linked to the assessment by each country on the current state of affairs of international relations, of their own threats and vulnerabilities, and their own relationship with other nuclear weapon states and other non-nuclear weapon states that they may have a quarrel with. So it's a very complex, it's a technical element, and it's an important element, which is part of the overall environment in which nuclear weapons states live in. So I think just, the Stockholm Initiative have a good ideas, good initiative. I think that the NPT Review Conference could be working based on that, and there will be other challenges, like, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike. There are many others. But at the end of the day, as I say in my first or second just answer, is that none of these technical issues in itself is going to make the trick. They are important or relevant, but have to be taken just together with others. I mean, if the P5 were to come to the negotiation table with only one such just initiative, I don't think that is going to be acceptable or enough, for the vast majority of state parties to the NPT. Now, the technicalities can be worked out later on, or the technicalities how to reach that probably have to be done by the nuclear weapon states, because obviously they are the ones who implement those ones and understand the complexities. But I think just you can start a process. I don't think at the NPT Review Conference will have the time nor the level of experts to thoroughly discuss these issues. I think just we need just to open a parallel process later on, maybe by the P5 and non-nuclear weapon states, in which these extremely technical but politically linked issues can be discussed and can be understood, because many states understand these issues from a different perspective. I think we have to start this dialogue. And again, it had to be in a frame, in a political frame, just looking to how we move forward on nuclear disarmament. If not, it's going to be good individual initiative, but it's not going to make the trick at the Review Conference. I'm afraid I may be wrong, but this is my feeling from several consultations with state parties. I know it's maybe I didn't give you just a technical answer. It's not up to me to that. But it's going to be part of the discussions of the Review Conference.
Sorry. Thank you, Ambassador. Now we have Hannah, and then we have Sava Nikulin. And time permitting, I will summarize a few questions which we received from the chat room from the attendees, but I probably will select one or two of them depending on the time. Hannah, please.
Thank you. I posted my question in the chat as well, so I'll just read it quickly. I wanted to ask a question about public awareness of the NPT and the 3 pillars. And by public, I'm including civil society as well as politicians, lawmakers, and other relevant actors. Various nuclear incidents and accidents like the 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima have eroded public perception and confidence in peaceful nuclear energy. And more recently with the pandemic, we're living in an environment with prolific fake news and increasing distrust in science. So I wanted to ask, what do you think are the most pressing issues with regards to education and outreach on nuclear issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Look, just the peaceful uses of peaceful applications of nuclear technologies and science in the context of the NPT review is very close to my heart. It's very close to the Argentine presidency because of our long-standing tradition of corporations and support other countries in this endeavor. I don't need to reiterate, all the many peaceful applications that we have from medicine, cancer treatment, to agriculture, to water treatment, even now, as I say, combating climate change or fighting diseases as COVID. I think just, for the experts, we are in this field. This is so obvious. When I was in Vienna 3 weeks ago and having consultation with the Vienna-based delegations, I mean, this is, bread of every day. It's every day's, bread and life, for them. But when you move out of Vienna, when you don't talk to the expert dealing with these, then it's a lot of, how to say, just misinformation, as you said that, misperceptions and lack of information. I'm not saying that, obviously the 3 Mile incident, that Fukushima incident, the Chernobyl incident have not changed the perception. Yes, it has. But I think that we're missing the point, just how many others, just thousands and thousands of hours operations of nuclear power reactors, or the non-power reactors, like at research institutes, universities, and those reactors producing isotopes for peaceful uses. They have never had, just a serious incident, and no one pays attention to that. I believe that we have to bring this knowledge, this awareness, to a broader array of circles. I think DG Grossi at the IAEA is called "Bring these issues to the larger table." And I told him when I met him, and we are good friends, obviously. We joined, the Foreign Service exactly at the same time, 32 years ago. And I was talking to him and I said, look, maybe the NPT can be the conduit. It is a political platform that we can reach out to other levels that maybe the IAEA, cannot. Look, I was based in Vienna. I was the representative of the IAEA Director General for 9 years in New York, and always I've seen, extremely difficult just to reach out to, for example, just the department, the development, world, the development departments or agencies back at our own capitals, or the climate change experts. When you talk to them, either they know nothing about nuclear applications or they have a negative view of that. So I think, and like it or not, at the end of the day, negotiations on climate change, of course, now it's in Glasgow and the COP26, but just climate change and as I say that another global matters not related to nuclear are dealt with in New York. So, and because the NPT Review Conference take place in New York, maybe we can be the helpers to bring awareness among delegations coming from capitals and delegations based in New York about the relevance of nuclear applications, both in terms of fighting climate change and helping the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we have to change. We have to break that barrier between those, separate, separate compartments. And I think that the NPT can help do that. I'm not going to say there's magic decisions, but I think and I think just through that we can reach out to the politicians, those at the policy level decisions, and politicians change. Probably they get used to that. So it have to be a continuing momentum of education and bringing up those issues to civil society, to think tanks like yours and others that already are doing a lot of work on that. But I think much more can be done. And I hope that the review conference can be used as a political platform to reach out to more circles than the usual back in Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, what I suggest now, we take a few questions together very quickly, and then you pick and choose, or you respond to all, or you respond to some, what you prefer, but okay. We probably need to put some limit here. So we will collect now Sava, then Sofia, and then I read a couple of questions I have. Sava. Microphone. Sava, microphone.
Yes, Your Excellency, thanks a lot for this lecture. I would like to ask a very brief question. From your point of view, what role will the IAEA safeguards issue and the political concerns about it in particular play during the forthcoming conference? Thank you.
Thank you. Sofia?
Thank you so much. And how do you think the 5 nuclear weapon states act at the upcoming RF conference will be the tone of the conference? Will they come to a consensus, or what will be the main stumbling block? Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia. And I guess it's really late night in Kemerovo, so almost morning, I think. So thank you for your commitment to these issues. And Mr. Ambassador, among those questions we received, I just list 2 or 3. And there are more definitely in our chat. First, Mr. Slipchenko, who worked together with Rafael Grossi on the CTBT in the 90s, on the CTBT writing and concluding, he is very anxious to know whether you really think there will be a chance to promote the CTBT cause and cause of its entry into force to promote it at the NPT and the forthcoming NPT review conference. There are also a few questions about AUKUS, how you see the AUKUS and proliferation concerns, maybe not necessarily directly affecting the conference and the letter of the NPT, but providing issues for the spirit, and also whether it may open a Pandora box, whether you see that risk. There are a number of questions regarding the Article 6 of the NPT, but the major question is whether you really see that the nuclear 5 will follow the commitment under the Article 6. I think you partly responded to that question already, but I see it very actively in the chat. And there is a question about South Asia, whether something can be done about bringing India and Pakistan closer to the nuclear non-proliferation norms. I probably would stop here, otherwise we would cross the whole globe and would put the basket even heavier that all of us can afford. Please.
Thank you for the barrage of questions, all of them very correct and very important ones. Let me just pick and choose some of them. The IAEA safeguards is going to be an important part of our discussion, the review conference, and the Pillar 2. There are many state parties that want to push for the obviously universalization of the comprehensive safeguards agreement. There's still a number of state parties to the NPT that have not reached a comprehensive safeguards agreement with the agency, and therefore be a push for those ones to do so as soon as possible, as well as for those state parties that they have a small quantity protocol with the agency to change those ones and move into standard comprehensive safeguards agreement. So I don't see so much of a problem with that. I believe that the issue will be raised when a number of delegations at the conference are going to push for having the additional protocol to the comprehensive safeguards agreement to be considered the new standard for verifications. There are many state parties that they want to do so. I believe that there are just a large majority of state parties have signed and ratified additional protocol, or they have additional protocols in place. But the problem over there is that a small number of delegations, in particular Brazil and Egypt, they insist that the additional protocol is of a voluntary nature. And if you look into the records, when the IAEA Board of Governors adopted that protocol, and I was there in Vienna by then, it was the so-called 92+3 process that was based after the discovery by the IAEA of Iraq's governments under Saddam Hussein to devise a secret nuclear weapons programs under the hiding from the IAEA safeguards system, that they decided that to revamp the process, and that's why they came up with the additional protocol. Now, during those negotiations in Vienna, and as I said, as a young diplomat, from Argentina. I was part of those negotiations, and I remember very well that, a number of members of the Board of Governors, including Brazil and Argentina and Egypt and others, we pushed for that voluntary concept, and therefore is that the decision by the Board of Governors. Based on that, I don't see will be possible to have a consensus on an outcome document with a language calling for the decision protocol to be the new standard for verifications. But I think, as I said before, many other delegations are going to be calling that. And again, it will be a matter of compromise and what type of language we can get that. But I think, as that will be the main issue of contentions regarding the safeguard system of the agency. Very quickly, the CTBT is going to be in the mind and statement of many delegations. The entry into force, the full entry into force of the CTBT is going to be a push by, I would say, a vast majority of state parties. They believe that the entry into force of the CTBT and the early negotiation of FMCT at the CD are part of process towards nuclear disarmament, as is seen by a vast majority of state parties. I'm expecting the Secretary Executive, Dr. Floyd of the CTBTO, to be present at the review conference, also to make his own speech and pitching for the entry into force. Obviously, there are some complexities, and we know exactly the situation at the U.S. Senate, but also other countries that have not signed nor ratified the CTBT. That is going to be challenging, but I think the push for the CTBT's entry into force will be there at the review conference. Now, the AUKUS issue obviously is a new development on the negative side. Many state parties have reacted negatively to that announcement. Still, I think it's a bit, too early, too premature to call it whether it's going to be a disruptive issue at the review conference, because that agreement has not entered into force, in the sense that the three countries, just Australia, UK, and US, have said that it will take 18 months to assess the technical feasibilities and legal feasibilities. So we don't know whether at the end of the day it's going to be implemented or not. But in theory, in concept, this is being seen by many delegations as going against not the letter of the NPT, but the spirit and the goal of the NPT. So I'm expecting, many delegations to raise these issues, just to call it as a disruptive, but I hope that it's not going to be a stumbling block at the negotiations. Obviously, on the Article 6, as I said before, I believe that nuclear disarmament this time around is going to be probably the most challenging part of the review conference. And what to do with the past commitment is going to be key at that. I hope that the P5 will come up, with some general understanding and concept that they have to address that issue. Again, it will be a matter of language, how we will address that. But also, I'm telling those who are pushing for the reconfirmation of past commitment that they rightly can do so. But I think that they should also focus on what to get from the nuclear weapon states, from now on. I think that it's as important as looking into the past, what has been implemented or has not been implemented from commitment of the previous conferences. In my mind, it's as important, or even more important, is that what we can get from the nuclear weapon states that they can commit or at least try to implement in the next review cycle. I think that, in my mind, the value of the, I will put my money into that part, into the forward-looking. But I understand, just from, from a moralistic point of view, a principle point of view, for many delegations, dealing with, past commitments, something that the review conference have to deal with. And very briefly, and I think that's linked to what Sophia mentioned about the nuclear weapon state, just what they can bring to the table. I think they can bring a lot. I know it's not easy. They have their own national processes, dealing with their own nuclear doctrines and approaches. Changing that is not easy. But I believe that if they take, the political decision on the highest level to send a strong message. And I'm not saying a repetition of the Reagan Gorbachev, of course, mantra is going to be important, but I think I have to go beyond that. I think just is N5 has to go to the conference and say, look, guys, we are in the same boat, and still we want to have just nuclear disarmament. We have some issues, we have some problems, but promise we'll keep working on that. I don't know. It have to be something more of a high-level political, call it declarations or statement, whatever, but they have to be. So I think just much more it's on the hands of the N5, but at the end of the day will be how much the non-nuclear weapon state are going to push on that. I may be missing a couple of things. I think just on South Asia, I would rather not refer to. I mean, they're not party to the treaty. There's another state which is not part of the treaty that always is being called for to adhere and accede to the NPT. Just the other two are not so much. But I believe that when the review conference is going to be making a call for the universalization of the treaty, that will include also those two states in South Asia. Whether it's achievable in the short terms or not, this is a different discussion. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zlauvinen. And in fact, we're very much supportive to the ideas of universalization of the treaty, but also looking realistically at those steps, how it can and should be done. Thank you very much for being with us, for sharing your thoughts, for maintaining this dialogue with our very experienced and very young participants of this virtual group. Indeed, I think that to have progress, to have good feeling at the conference, we need at least two things. First, we need to avoid the blame game. And this is what unfortunately was poisoning the 2015 conference, and hopefully we will avoid the blame game for this conference and this cycle. And secondly, probably even more importantly, that the spirit and the practice of cooperation, cooperative mode, is extremely important, going beyond those groups, haves, have-nots, coalitions, that generally the cooperative spirit is essential for our good feelings that the review is going smoothly and positively. And actually, thinking of cooperative spirit, Mr. Ambassador, we are very happy that we will work face-to-face in New York with all the virtues and with all the greatness of technical advances of the virtual world. We have some glitches. Sometimes just myself, before we started our discussion, all my village got the apagon. So basically our electricity grid collapsed and communications collapsed. So how can I achieve you and the whole group of us? We had to go just to the fields, to Campo, and see a friendly farmer who immediately provided a generator to me in a very friendly manner. If we have a similar spirit at the conference, even when the situation may be desperate, if some apagons happen here and there, if a friendly individual or state party provides goodwill, that definitely would be extremely helpful and important. And I wish you to have as few apagons at the conference as you can, and as many people or individual state parties with goodwill surrounding you and supporting your very important mission. With all, may I thank you so much, and see you in Nueva York.
Muchas gracias, Dr. Orlov, and I'm looking forward to see you in person in New York. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to have, just a civil society to be present in person in New York. I hope that I can achieve that. I hope so.
Muchísimas gracias.
Okay, spasiba, muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego, gracias.